Hi, I'm Brandon Fertig of The Periphery. If you watch my channel, you know that I go around and I interview people around the country, sometimes even around the world. Well, not only do I capture their stories and learn about where they're from and their perspectives on the world, but I like to observe aspects about humanity. Especially when I'm living abroad, I'm able to watch the townspeople, watch the church, and in the case of today's video, watch a political event. During this time of the tension of the US election, I'm going to talk about an observation of politics in another culture. If you look at things on a global scale, you can take a step back and you can see just how universal this stuff is, how innate it is as a part of who we are as human beings. And I think that broad view, that take a step back view, helps us not get so wrapped up in any one particular party, affiliation, and certainly just one election. So here's my story. 6 years ago in Tanzania, I witnessed a political campaign rally in the village I was working in. I was there setting up a computer lab for a village school. Well, one day, I think it was a weekday, in the afternoon, I heard some noise of a truck and vehicles coming into town, which wasn't super common there. On the dirt road, this motorcade of trucks and one big truck with speakers in the back. They crawled into town and then they went off the road into the village and made their way through the small paths and roads to the village's soccer field. Now the music from these trucks really got going, and a crowd of locals was there greeting the trucks. There was like a DJ getting them pumped up. The locals and the villagers were there dancing, holding up a picture of this particular candidate's face on a stick. Well, I immediately noted the similarity between this campaign stop and those in the US, and then just the overall energy of getting excited about the candidate, that if you elect this person, everything's going to be okay. But actually, that wasn't the most surprising similarity that I noticed when it came to politics there. This particular candidate was one of two that were representing the two major parties, or at least one major party and one contender for this particular national political office, a representative to the national parliament of Tanzania. And the platforms of these two parties, the more I learned, gosh, they sounded awfully familiar. So one side, I came to find out, and I did so by talking to villagers and learning who they're voting for and all that. I found that the older villagers, they tended to favor with one side, and this was the side that favored business, tradition. And the other side tended to be favored by younger people. They're more in the city, and they appreciated this party more because they championed social causes such as education and healthcare. When I was lining them up, I realized, man, this split resembles Republicans and Democrats in the US. And there was some enlightenment in seeing that, like, this is not just a US thing. And, other countries have multiple parties, but even they kind of break between a conservative and a liberal halves. And I use those terms loosely, but I think we understand what I mean when I say, conservative side, a liberal side. Even when I was in China, there tended to be this amongst the people, especially in Hong Kong, where they had democratically elected politicians, as opposed to China that doesn't have open politics. But I still noticed this same dichotomy, this same split. And I realized, man, humans the world over, you've got this conservative side, this liberal side, one that keeps society rooted, and one that helps it moving forward. And then on the flip side, they balance each other out, right? So the liberal side will kind of help move the society forward so it doesn't get too grounded, too rooted, too stuck. And then the conservative side, if you think of it as like a tug of war, they're pulling back, saying, hey, don't take us off the edge with policy that's too reckless. Let's not forget to be wise and prudent here. So they work in tandem, I think. And it's certainly deeper than any particular party, any country, and then of course any particular election. That brings us to this month in the US. Probably for 95% of the country who voted for either major candidate for president, it's been a very up and down time. Particularly on election day, November 3rd, it looked like one candidate was going to win, and the next day it looked like the next candidate was going to win. Well, the drama of 2020, the fact that one of the candidates, Trump, is definitely an eccentric, and just the overall noise, a volume of feedback, of drama, of people getting into it from social media and the internet, the 24/7 coverage, I think just makes this year seem, and maybe it is, all the more critical. But certainly, it makes people more latched on to who they're gonna vote for and who has to win. And I think lost within this is that we have these two major political leanings on this teeter-totter or something, whatever analogy you want to use. And they're innate parts of who we are. And by being innate parts of who we are, there's a tendency to even things out. I look at it like the masculine and feminine, right? You've got two sides of the whole, the yin and the yang, whatever other one you want to use, and they're complements. They're to work together. And I started noticing these things right here in the U.S. So, for instance, the U.S. Supreme Court recently became a strong majority of conservatives, but even before this recent justice came aboard, they had a 5-4 lead on the Supreme Court. Conservatives did over liberals. But something funny happened when some crucial cases came up to the court. One of the conservative justices started to suddenly empathize more, seemingly to me from out of nowhere. Maybe if you knew a little more about him, you wouldn't think so. But it just seemed like suddenly he started to see things a little more liberally. Look at this county down in southern Texas on the border with Mexico. I don't know if it's Zapata County. They're 93% Hispanic. They voted overwhelmingly for Hillary Clinton in 2016. But again, seemingly, suddenly, inexplicably, they gave Trump the majority of their support for this 2020 election. It has people flabbergasted because they think if there's one population in one part of the country that would certainly be even more Democratic strong, then it would be this county after a president who people accuse and have accused relentlessly as being, not just anti-immigrant, but even racist. So, how could this particular county vote for Trump? Well, again, I just think sometimes you hear, while liberals are concerned about the Supreme Court being too heavily conservative and then seeing suddenly some equilibrium there, I think you see the same thing with Republicans and Democrats and white and non-white populations in the U.S. where people think, oh, it's only the white people that vote Republican, so when whites lose as their majority shrinks, as it will, and as they eventually become a minority, which will happen, then Republicans are toast, right? There'll be no more voting for them. But then look at this county in Texas, 93% Hispanic, and most of them voted for Trump. So I think there's more evidence of this tendency for things to even out. And then just look at things as they are right now in Washington at the federal level. Let's assume Democrats do take the White House, which I think is likely to happen. But we've got the Republicans who are likely to control the Senate. The Democrats will take the House of Representatives, and the Republicans will have the Supreme Court. So if you take those four bodies, 2 and 2, right? We like to zero in on each of these, each of the county, the Supreme Court justice, look for explanations. But I think if we can just take a step back and look at it broadly, we can see this tendency toward political equilibrium. And to me, this is a comforting thought, right? The perspective and the thought. Because one, it helps us relax when we're worried that the other side is going to take over. Suddenly we find that oh, some on our side are, you know, going over there. Like there's just, again, this equilibrium. But two, it encourages us to take a broader view of things, to take a step back away from the intense drama, and that obviously just by itself will be relaxing. You know, there's always going to be pushes and setbacks for each political party, just like there's volatile day-to-day movement of a stock. But meanwhile, there's this greater tendency, just as the stock market or a stock you think will have an overall tendency to rise, well, in the U.S. there's this greater tendency toward equilibrium, which actually is ideal. And that brings us to another point, that if we acknowledge that it's ideal to be equal, that we want that middle ground and not things that move too fast off the cliff or get too stuck, then that also helps us detach from our ideology. But just a note on political equilibrium. There are, of course, historical exceptions to this. There have been extreme one-sidedness in just the last 100 years in the Western world. And most notably, of course, famously, during World War II, we had the catastrophic political experiments of Germany and Russia, where Germany was radically to the right and Russia was radically to the left. So there are those cases where people can point to and say, oh yeah, you know, there might be this tendency, but what if? You know, it happened before, why can't it happen again? But this is a different world. It's decentralized, more so with the internet. It seems like every time there's a push one way, there's a reaction the other. And we're a different country, right? So not only are we in a more decentralized time with more fragments and just personal empowerment and different movements happening and things like that, it's harder to wrangle everyone together. But we're a decentralized nation. We don't have to worry so much about, I think, unifying radicalism as much as we have to worry about polarity, where, you know, the two sides are just becoming more and more distant. Other videos of mine, you'll see that I make that case. We do, though, have citywide examples to learn from of the harms of one-sided extremism. But this lesson about the harms of ideological imbalance and the desire for balance and the personal benefits of this desire, I'm actually going to save for another video. For now, I just want us to take a step back, acknowledge the political equilibrium tendency in play. We don't just relax a little bit from being too wrapped up in the day-to-day, but we're now also able to refocus, right? A little less on that, a little more on this, a little more on our priorities in life, right? This is family and community, and of course, personal growth. Thanks.